Welcome to the International News Program. Highlights related to tensions in Europe, along with many new developments around the world, will be presented to you on today's program. Avdiivka has been one of the main targets of a Russian winter offensive which was intended to reinvigorate Moscow's full-scale invasion, launched in February 2022, but has made only small territorial advances in the east. A video released by the president's office showed Zelensky addressing troops in combat gear and handing them medals in what appeared to be a large industrial warehouse with sandbags packed against at least one of the high walls. Zelensky also paid a surprise visit to a hospital in the Donetsk region on Tuesday, April 18, meeting wounded soldiers and handing out awards. The Kremlin said on Tuesday, April 18, that President Vladimir Putin's visit to Russian-held areas of Ukraine's Luhansk and Kherson regions took place on Monday, April 17. It added that Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and Chief of the General Staff Valery Gerasimov did not accompany President Vladimir Putin on a trip to Russian-controlled territories in Ukraine as a security precaution. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said it was a big risk for Russia's top commanders to gather together in one place so close to the front lines. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu told his Chinese counterpart on Tuesday, April 18, that their country's military cooperation was a stabilizing force in the world and helped to reduce the chances of conflict, Russian news agencies reported. The Interfax news agency quoted Shoigu as telling Lee on Tuesday, "The coordination of our efforts in the international arena has a stabilizing effect on the global situation and helps to reduce the potential for conflict." General Shoigu added that it is important that the two countries coordinate their efforts on the international stage. Shoigu also expressed confidence that the joint military exercise program between Russia and China will be expanded. Lee met President Vladimir Putin on Sunday, April 16. Before his meeting with Shoigu at the Russian Defense Ministry in Moscow, Chinese Defense Minister Li Shangfu is currently in Moscow as the countries look to deepen their military cooperation. Chinese President Xi Jinping visited Moscow last month to show his support for Russia and his desire to boost bilateral relations. China has emerged as Russia's most important international partner in the 14 months since Moscow invaded Ukraine. Chinese Defense Minister Li Shangfu is currently in Moscow as the countries look to deepen their military cooperation, which has raised concerns in the West. Colonel General Alexander Syrsky, commander of the ground forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, has stated that the situation in Bakhmut is currently under control, although Russian forces are turning the city into ruins. Syrsky on Telegram, "The Bakhmut front remains the epicenter of the fighting. The enemy is concentrating most of its efforts there and is determined to take control of the city at any cost. At the same time, our soldiers are inflicting significant losses on the enemy and significantly slowing down its offensive. The battle for Bakhmut is ongoing. The situation is currently under control." Syrsky said that the invaders are conducting offensive operations on several fronts simultaneously, but to no avail in most of them. In particular, Russian troops attempted to conduct offensive operations on the Kupiansk front, but thanks to Ukrainian artillery, enemy units fled before they even reached the point of attack. The occupiers' actions were also unsuccessful on the Lyman front. The Russian military has demonstrated an ability to learn and adapt in its war against Ukraine despite critical observations made about its special military operation, according to a retired Australian Army general. Mick Ryan, a retired Major General in the Australian Army, wrote Monday in a Twitter thread and on his Substack that, contrary to the many Russian are stupid stereotypes that have developed throughout the war, the nation's military has improved in three main areas: strategic adaptation, operational adaptation, and tactical adaptation. The Russians appeared to learn, Ryan wrote. Their conduct of the withdrawal from Kherson in October and November 2022 shows that they had adapted. They were able to undertake a large-scale river crossing operation and extract a large portion of the Russian forces that were deployed in the south of Ukraine. Instead of more maneuverist, tactics, they adopted a very attritional model, he added, citing Russians' use of more artillery guided by unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, to advance slowly but more cautiously as to not expose logistical targets. The purpose is to avoid exposing the targets in the supply line, hindering Ukraine's attack. According to a retired Australian general, the Russian military still faces a number of complex problems, but it cannot be denied that they have learned certain lessons and developed significantly. The team of the Kremlin can adapt to the combat situation in Ukraine, possibly repair their weaknesses, and also take advantage of the vulnerabilities of the Ukrainian forces and Western intelligence, wrote Ryan. Currently, Kyiv and Moscow have not commented on the retired Australian general's assessments. Recently, Russia launched a stronger offensive in Bakhmut and the entire Donbass region in general, while Ukraine's counterattack has not yet taken place. The reason for this is that the ground is extremely muddy and wet, making it difficult to move heavy combat vehicles. In addition, Kyiv says it is waiting to receive necessary weapons from the West. The Kremlin said on Tuesday, April 18, that Brazil's efforts to mediate in the conflict in Ukraine deserved attention, but it had not seen any plans for a peace deal presented by France. Bloomberg reported earlier that French President Emmanuel Macron was looking to approach China with a plan that could form the basis for talks between Moscow and Kyiv. Meanwhile, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva drew criticism from the United States on Monday for his recent comments suggesting the West had been encouraging the conflict by arming Ukraine. He said Washington should stop sending weapons to Ukraine and start talking about peace. Lula has proposed establishing a group of countries not involved with the conflict to broker peace, telling reporters on Sunday he had discussed the idea with the leaders of China and the United Arab Emirates. Asked about Lula's suggestion, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters, "Any ideas that take account of Russia's interests deserve attention and certainly need to be listened to." To date, after the international community has repeatedly called for the restoration of peace in Ukraine, the Russian side has said that it is ready to negotiate but with preconditions, including Kyiv accepting that new reality, specifically was the annexation of 4 Ukrainian territories at the end of September last year. Ukraine has repeatedly said it will not discuss peace or a ceasefire until Russian troops leave every inch of Ukraine's internationally recognized territory, with President Volodymyr Zelensky saying any temporary truce would simply allow Russia to regroup for a future attack. Bloomberg reported on Tuesday that Macron was trying to work with China to devise a plan that could be used as a basis for talks between the two sides. The Kremlin said it had seen the reports but had not been in touch with France on the issue. "We are not aware of the existence of any French plan, we have not received anything from the French side," Peskov said. Evan Gershkovich, the Wall Street Journal reporter arrested in Russia on espionage charges, has lost his appeal against his arrest and detention in the former KGB prison where he's being held pending trial. This was Gershkovich in court Tuesday, April 18. The hearing was effectively procedural, covering how he should be held before the trial, but not about the substance of the charges. The U.S. ambassador to Russia Lynn Tracy says she made her first personal visit to Gershkovich on Monday, April 17. "It was the first time we were granted consular access since his wrongful detention more than 2 weeks ago. I can report that he is in good health and remains strong despite his circumstances." Court documents give only a basic outlining of the case against Gershkovich, and the judiciary has said it is forbidden to publish some. He's accused of collecting state secrets about the military-industrial complex in Russia, was arrested in the city of Ekaterinburg on March 29. The Kremlin says he was using journalism as a cover for espionage, which both the U.S. government and Wall Street Journal deny. Ambassador Tracy was also outside a court Monday for the separate sentencing of a Russian opposition figure, Vladimir Kara-Murza, to 25 years prison on treason charges, which he denies. More than 35 grain ships waited at anchor off the Istanbul coast on Tuesday, April 18, after Ukraine denied that Russian inspectors had restarted inspections under the Black Sea deal. Drone footage showed ships near Istanbul as the United Nations data put the number of vessels waiting to more than 35. Russia's RIA news agency reported earlier on Tuesday that inspections of ships moving grain from Ukraine had restarted, citing a senior Russian foreign ministry official. But a senior Ukrainian official, who asked not to be identified, told Reuters, "Nothing has been resolved. There are no inspections." On Monday, April 17, Kyiv said a UN brokered initiative allowing the safe Black Sea export of Ukrainian grain was in danger of shutdown after Russia blocked inspections of participating ships in Turkish waters. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Russia is breaking its promises to countries around the world that are dependent on grain that has not been able to get out of Ukraine over the last few days. Russian state news agency TASS reported on Tuesday, citing Vasily Nebenzia, Russia's permanent representative to the UN. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is set to discuss the Black Sea grain deal with United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres when he visits New York next week. The trip of Lavrov to New York is carried out after the Russian ambassador to the US, Anatoly Antonov, urged Washington last week to grant permission for the foreign minister's plane and visas for the Russian delegation to preside over the UN Security Council meeting in New York. In response, a spokesperson for the U.S. State Department stated last week that, as the host of the United Nations, Washington will strictly fulfill its obligations under the UN Charter, including visa issuance. Accordingly, the federal, state or local authorities of the United States shall not impose any impediments to transit to or from the headquarters of representatives of members or officials of the United Nations, or of specialized agencies as set forth in Article 57, Paragraph 2, of the Charter, or their families. China's Foreign Ministry on Tuesday, April 18, disputed U.S. claims of a Chinese secret police station in New York, after U.S. federal agents arrested 2 New York residents for allegedly running a covert station for China's police force. China maintains a policy of non-interference in other countries, and these alleged police stations do not exist. This is complete political manipulation. You mentioned the issue regarding overseas police stations. We have explained this many times. The relevant statement has no factual basis, said Wang. U.S. federal agents arrested Liu Jianwang, 61, and Chen Jinping, 59, on Monday, April 17, for allegedly operating a Chinese secret police station in the Chinatown district of Manhattan. Both Liu and Chen face charges of conspiring to act as agents of China's government without informing U.S. authorities and obstruction of justice. They were released on bond following an initial appearance in Brooklyn federal court. China's foreign ministry said on Tuesday, April 18, it firmly opposed Taiwan's reported plan to buy 400 U.S. land-launched Harpoon missiles. Taiwan will buy as many as 400 U.S. land-launched Harpoon missiles in the face of rising threat from China, Bloomberg News reported on Monday, April 17, citing a trade group's leader and people familiar with the issue. The Pentagon announced a $1.17 billion contract for 400 of the anti-ship missiles on April 7 without naming the buyer, saying production was expected to be completed by March 2029. Bloomberg said Taiwan was the buyer. China will take resolute and forceful measures to defend its sovereignty and security interests, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said at Tuesday briefing in Beijing. This month, U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy hosted Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen in California and stressed the need to accelerate arms deliveries to Taiwan in the face of rising threats from China. After the meeting, Mike Gallagher, Republican chairman of the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, said he would like to look for ways to get Harpoon missiles to Taiwan ahead of those scheduled to go to Saudi Arabia. China's foreign ministry on Tuesday, April 18, urged officials to abandon a Cold War mentality and stop hyping up the China threat narrative, just after a Dutch spy agency called China the greatest security threat to the Netherlands. In annual assessment of threats that included commercial espionage and covert investments released on Monday, April 18, the Netherlands Intelligence Service cited China as the greatest threat to Dutch economic security. While the Netherlands regards China as a major trading partner, its military ambitions are driving attempts to obtain Dutch and Western technologies, the agency, known by its acronym AIVD, said in its 2022 annual report. North Korean state media KCNA reported on Wednesday. North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un has ordered officials to prepare to launch the country's first military reconnaissance satellite last December. North Korea claimed it had conducted an important final stage test for the development of a spy satellite. The country's Space Development Agency announced that it would finish preparations for the first military reconnaissance satellite by April 2023. During his visit to the National Aerospace Development Administration on Tuesday, Kim Jong-un said the country's military reconnaissance satellite production has been completed and ordered the dispatching of several reconnaissance satellites. KCNA reported Kim stressed the role of military satellites as to protect national safety and territorial stability in the midst of escalating military threats and challenges by the United States and South Korea. Kim also spoke about the role of satellites and its strategic value when deploying military force preemptively according to the situation, KCNA said. Kim said the acquisition of military reconnaissance satellites was indispensable, calling them a right to national sovereignty and self-defense. The independence movement remains active in Papua, Indonesia. Accordingly, Indonesian military commander Lieutenant General Yudo Margono announced on April 18 that 4 soldiers were missing after a shootout with separatist rebels in Papua province. The soldiers were attempting to rescue a New Zealand pilot kidnapped by rebels after visiting the unstable area. Margono told the press that in addition to the 4 missing soldiers, 5 others were injured in the shootout. The commander stressed that the Indonesian military was ready for a campaign, but he did not disclose the details. New Zealand pilot Philip Mertens was flying for Suzy Air to West Papua when he was kidnapped in February this year. The incident fueled tensions between the rebel group known as West Papua National Liberation Army and Indonesian security forces. The rebels claimed to have burned the plane flown by the New Zealand pilot. They also demanded that all flights to Paro Airport in the region be halted and declared that they would only release the pilot if the Indonesian government recognized Papua's independence. In an effort to rescue a pilot last week, a group of Ukrainian soldiers engaged in fierce clashes with rebels. A representative of the armed group reported that they had killed 15 Indonesian soldiers after Jakarta refused to negotiate. The military commander denied this information, confirming only 1 soldier killed. Rebel forces in Papua, the Far East region of Indonesia, have demanded independence since the end of Dutch colonial rule. Conflict in the impoverished but resource-rich area has intensified in recent years. The Indonesian military has maintained a heavy presence in the region. Teams from NATO nations and partners trained to defend against coordinated cyber attacks on Tuesday, April 18, in the annual Locked Shields exercise. The exercise in Tallinn is organized by NATO's Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence, CTOS, based in Estonia, which offers training and research to NATO member and partner countries. CTOS Director Mart Numa said awareness of cyber attacks sponsored by countries like Russia had increased and such attacks were actively used against democratic nations.